Hey everybody, in this video we're just going to quickly go over some techniques to compare negative decimal values. So in Georgia's K-8 math standards, beginning in the 4th grade, we're seeing that students are expected to use visual models to develop part and whole reasoning when comparing decimal numbers, and we're also seeing them being required to list the negative numbers in order from smallest to biggest. And then in the 4th grade, students are also expected to be able to compare positive decimal values using the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. And in the 6th and 7th grade, students will begin to use negative decimal numbers. All right, so starting with the most basic information, a positive decimal number is always going to be greater than a negative decimal number. All right, so a positive decimal number is always greater than a negative decimal number. Whenever you're comparing two decimals that are negative, the one that's closest to 0 is always greater, and the one that is farther is smaller. All right, so the farther a decimal is from 0, the smaller its value. Alright, so let's look at some examples. We're comparing decimals using the symbols less than, greater than, or equal to. We're starting with the number line approach to comparing decimal numbers. This is pretty easy for students to do, especially if you have covered this well with your students, how to plot decimals on the number line. Alright, so when we use a number line, we can compare decimal numbers by judging which one is closest to 0. All right, so I'm going to start by plotting these two numbers on our number line, negative 5.57 or negative 5 and 57 hundredths and negative 5 and 59 hundredths. All right, so I'm going to start by plotting 0. I'm in the hundredths place, so I'm going to go in between negative 5.5 and negative 5.6. I put my 9 little tick marks to separate that into 10 smaller intervals. And when I'm counting up here, let me switch to my laser. When I'm counting here, I'm going negative 5.5, negative 5.51, negative 5.52, negative 5.53, negative 5.54, negative 5.55, negative 5.56, and negative 5.57. All right, and then continuing over, negative 5.58, negative 5.59. Right, so now it's easy to see which one is closest to 0. Negative 5.57 is closest to 0. So it is greater, so we're going to open the little mouth towards the number negative 5.57. It's still pretty standard practice, I think, to teach kids the little alligator method, where the alligator wants to eat the larger number. Right, next we have negative 3.31 and negative 0.331. Right, so start by plotting 0 on your number line. We've got a pretty big range of numbers here, so we're going to go negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and then plot the numbers. Negative 0.331, that would be in between 0 and negative 1, a little bit closer to 0. And then negative 3.31 or negative 3 and 31 hundredths, that would be a little bit past negative 3. All right, so a little bit past negative 3. All right, so negative 0 and 331 thousandths would be closer to 0, so we're going to open the mouth towards the greater number. All right, next we have two negative decimals, negative 0.78 or negative 78 hundredths and negative 74 hundredths. All right, so we start by plotting 0, going in between negative 0.7 and negative 0.8. All right, then we do our 9 little tick marks, separating that into 10 intervals, and then we could start counting. Negative 0.71, negative 0.72, negative 0.73, negative 0.74. All right, and then negative 0.75, negative 0.76, negative 0.77, negative 0.78. All right, so now we can see that negative 0 and 74 hundredths is closer to 0, so we open the mouth towards the greater number. All right, one last one with the number line method. All right, so plot your numbers. We have negative 49.33 or negative 49 and 33 hundredths and negative 49 and 3 tenths. All right, so I'm starting by plotting negative 49 and 3 tenths, and then I'm doing negative 49 and 4 tenths. Then I'm going to do my little tick marks in between to split that into 10 intervals, 10 smaller intervals. All right, so this is negative 49 and 3 tenths. This is going to be negative 49.31, negative 49.32, negative 49.33. All right, so we've got our negative 49.3 here, and then negative 49.33 is here. We know that 0 is somewhere over here to the right. All right, so negative 49.3 would be closer to 0. You can also compare decimals by thinking about this as amount of money owed or amount of money that's like withdrawn, amount that's overdrawn in your bank account. All right, so think of this as like amount of money owed or amount of money that you're overdrawn. Of course, if you were teaching this to kids, you would probably want to say like the amount of money owed. That would probably be more relevant. All right, so we start by filling that in with a 0. All right, so one person owes negative 59, or excuse me, one person owes $59.30. One person owes $59.31. So the less you owe, the more you have. All right, so the less you owe, the more you have. So that's going to be the greater number. All right, so the person that owes less is this person on the left, the person that owes $59.30. So that one is our greater number. All right, so I would suggest this method if you have 2 decimal places. Of course, if you had 3 decimal places, it would be harder for students to relate that to a money situation. All right, and then lastly, we have negative 9 and 60 hundredths and negative 9 and 6 tenths. All right, so we know that we can fill in a 0 behind that 6, and now you can see that they match, and so those two are equal. All right, guys, let me know if you have any questions about comparing decimals, specifically about comparing negative decimals, and I'll see you guys next week.